Well, my name is Alan Ball, and I'm the National Director for White Ribbon Australia. And I wanted to first start off by acknowledging country and pay my acknowledging the traditional custodians of country through Australia and their continuing connection to land, waters, and the community. And we pay our respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and to elders past and present. And I would like to extend a warmest appreciation for those Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that join us today, and for those who will be viewing this after today's webinar. Whether or not it's morning, afternoon, or the evening, depending where you're dialing in from, we've had a warm reception to today's webinar. I know that some of you are joining from every state and territory across Australia, and I'm on Whadjuk Noongar country here in Perth, so I know it's 9 a.m. But for some of our panelists, they're on the eastern seaboard, and we've got people dialing in from New Zealand, from Malaysia, from the United Kingdom, from Canada, and so it is definitely a global engagement today. We're talking about respect, inclusivity, and our ethical obligation to prevent violence, disrespect, and harassment at work. I wanted to start off by acknowledging that the information provided in this webinar is for general information purposes only and is not here to provide or replace legal advice. And we've provided some information in our chat today just to explain that a little bit further. There has been so much change on the Australian landscape in terms of legislation and culture in relationship to respect in the workplace. And today we're going to be discussing not only positive duty, but we're going to be looking genuinely at inclusion and respect and organisations' proactive response and duty to address it. In Australia, it's time that we raise the bar and the collective bar for what it means to promote safety and inclusion in Australian workplaces. But we're not starting off with a blank slate. And today I'm really excited to be joined by some incredible panelists. So we have Ifrin, who's the CEO from SisterWorks. So hello and welcome. We have Dixie, who joins us here, and she's going to talk very much about her own experiences, but I just wanted to shout out an amazing post LinkedIn globally. So I'm having a big fan moment over here. So well done on representing on the national landscape. We have Jan, who's the founder and of Growth Wave. Hello, Jan. Thank you. And we
Alan.
Hello. And we have Bruce McGowan, who will join us very shortly, who's the interim Chief People Officer at Scope Australia. But he is also our independent chair for our Workplace Accreditation Committee. So he might be having a little technical difficulty, but I know that he'll be joining us really soon because we just had a bit of a meeting beforehand.
Alan, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. I can't see you on screen, but hello, Bruce.
That's all right. We're working on that. Bit of a technical issue, but at least we've got audio, Alan.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. It's great to hear you, Bruce, and we'll see you very shortly. May I add, though, we want to hear from our webinar people, and we also want to hear from you who are joining in. So if you do have any questions or comments, please pop them into the chat, and if we have time at the end, we're going to address those. We do know, and we wanted to acknowledge that maybe some of the things that might be discussed today might raise something really important for you or might raise some concerns. And so in the chat, we're putting the lines to 1-800-RESPECT, Lifeline, and Men's Referral Care. It's important that we look after each other and we look after ourselves as well. So Bruce, I am going to throw over to you. I know you're not on the screen, but we can hear your voice. Recently, the federal government has launched a real comprehensive resource hub, Respect at Work, as part of their commitment and recommendations from the Jenkins report into partnerships with a number of agencies like WGEA and the Human Rights Commission. So I'm going to start off by just getting your general sense on what does respect really look like in Australian workplaces?
Thank you, Alan, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. And it's a privilege to be part of this panel. I think to frame this question, I'd like to reference some research that was in the Harvard Business Review in an article by Christy Rogers in 2018 called "Do Your Employees Feel Respected?" And I'll make sure I pop that link into the chat. And the reason for putting this context, because I think in a workplace setting that we need to think about respect in two ways. The first is that that respect is the most important leadership behaviour. This article phrases respect in two ways. There's two different distinct types of workplace respect. The first is owed respect. And this is accorded equally to all members in the workplace and is characterised by an atmosphere that every member is inherently valuable. So that's incredibly important. And workplaces with too little of the owed respect show a lack of civility and leadership behaviours that are characterised by things like over-monitoring and micromanagement. And the research talks about this second part of respect, being earned respect, is not well understood by leaders in organisations. And earned respect is all about recognising that individual employees display valued qualities or behaviour are affirmed according to that each individual has unique strengths and talents. And earned respect means that I'm recognised and I'm rewarded in a way that I feel good about, and that makes me feel good. And getting the balance between owed respect and earned respect is very important. And we can talk more about that later. But each workplace needs to approach this respect in the context of the culture they're intentionally creating that is aligned to their business strategy, vision, and values. But the key takeaway all out of this that I'd like to put to webinar is that there's a strong element of leadership that is required within a workplace setting around those two areas of owed respect and earned respect. So I'll throw back to you, Alan.
Look, Bruce, I really appreciate that. And if you can share those links, that would be great, particularly around owed respect. Ifrin, for you, what does respect look like for you in the workplace?
I think I'd like to answer these questions from maybe the point of view of the team members of the organizations. There's so many instructions out there on how to demonstrate respect at work, what to do, what not to do. But I think it comes down to, successful implementation of respect, whether or not the respect is there at the organizations is reflected of the feeling of the people in the organization. So to me, it's when everyone from the board, the CEO, and down to the, the security guards feel safe and equally valued in conducting their duties, where they can have their voice or opinions without the fear of being judged or belittled. And when they also know that there are differences and they recognize that there are differences in diversity, skin color, religious beliefs, sexual identity and orientations, but those differences are embraced, celebrated, and entrenched in the organizations and systems. So I think at the end, the success of, whether or not there is respect or not in the organization, it really comes down to the feeling of the team members who are, working or participating in that organizations.
Thanks, Ifrin. And I like that concept around equally valued. And we're going to get to that very shortly because in concept, it's one thing, but the implementation is another. Yeah. Jan, I'm going to throw over to you. Respect in the workplace. What does it mean to you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Alan. And, really just building on Bruce and what Ifrin was saying, from my perspective, working with different organizations comes back to those fundamentals. So Ifrin touched on it, but for me, it's the most important thing is ensuring your people are feeling heard and they're feeling seen. So what that looks like in the workplace can be different depending on the demographic or the person's background, whether it's cultural or otherwise. But the most important thing is making sure that person feels seen and heard. And that might be in the form of representation. So from the leadership down, could also mean in terms of being able to give feedback openly and having that feedback heard. It's also seeing that turn into action. So it's one thing to get respect in terms of being heard and being seen, but then translating, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, Alan, but in terms of getting into, okay, how does that then permeate throughout the culture and the environment? Because this isn't something that just is static and stays still, it evolves. So what respect was 20 years ago is very different to what it is today. And I'd expect what it's going to look like in 10, 20 years time is also going to be changing. So it's important that leaders and organizations are staying up to date and relevant with the expectations, both culturally, but also around what our employees are expecting day in, day out.
And Jan, it would be really sad if respect didn't evolve, if it stayed static. So I think I'm really excited about that, and it's a good point. And Dixie, love to hear from you and your perspective on what respect looks like in the workplace.
Yeah, I think it's what I'm about to say is very complementary to what our other panelists have said. And I guess in particular in that point that you've just raised, Jan, is how we evolve as workplaces and how, the standard of what we accepted a few years ago, 20, 30 years ago, are very different to the way that we conduct ourselves in terms of, the company that we keep, and also that level of self-responsibility and self-respect that we not just have individually for us, but also the people that we're connected to within our workplaces. So for me, respect is certainly something that is felt. It's not a behavior that is, we all get to just tap in and out of. It's something that's going to be consistently done. I always come back to that point of that old saying, the standard you walk by is the standard that you accept. So the challenge that I put out to every person that I work with is, what are you intentionally creating? And this is another point that Bruce was just speaking about. What is the intention of the culture within the workplace? Is it for us to thrive? Is it for us to exist? Or is it for us to collaborate in the best ways that we possibly can, to be the best versions of ourselves as humans within our workplaces, but as people connected to multiple communities within our companies, within the communities that we are, whether it be a sporting organisation, the teams that you're a part of, the things that you volunteer with. Respect is about acceptance. It's certainly about recognising that there's difference. And I think one of the key challenges that we have in this country is that we talk about diversity and inclusion, but we just look at the visibility of what diversity is, but we actually don't do the heavy lifting around what inclusion actually means. And from my perspective, respect is not just about recognizing that there's difference. It is about recognizing, embracing, accepting, and celebrating that we all get to do things differently because of our worldviews and our lived experience. And until we start really doing that accepting, that celebrating, and embedding diversity and difference into our workplace cultures, both the things that we do consciously and the things that we do subconsciously, we're really not going to be able to move the needle towards equity or greater inclusion and equality in this country for anyone, whether or not you're a man or a woman, or you come from different cultural backgrounds and lived experience. It's got to be demonstrated value. So respect is a demonstrated value for me that evolves over time within your organisation, for you as a person, but also for your business.
Thanks, Dixie. And then thank you for opening that up. And I can see some comments there in the chat as well. Do strongly encourage you to comment there. Thank you, June, for sharing that quote, and particularly around those individual behaviours. Let's just be real here. I'm going to dust off the political niceness and all the political correctness right now, but we've seen a significant amount of lip service paid to diversity and inclusion in the workplace, and it picks up on your point there, Dixie. But with the execution of strategies not always landing as expected. So firstly, for those that are online who are employees and employers, why do workplaces need to pay attention to diversity and inclusion and equity in the workplace? And if it's not at the top of the agenda, what are the potential risks? And I'll throw it open to the panel to see who would like to answer that one first. And I know Bruce is going to join us very soon visually, but Bruce, if you're there, we would love to hear from you as well. Thanks, Efren.
Yeah.
Do I go first?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, I think this answer probably is a short one, but the fact of the matter is, without actually putting your attention into your diversity, inclusion, and equality in the workplace, then your workplace is not going to be a desirable one for people to work for. And you're missing out on a lot of talents and a lot of dedications that people want to be part of you. And also, I think without them, in this day and age where we have actually evolved into such multicultural, multifaceted community, everywhere you look, it is really all about that diversity, inclusion, or the representations is everywhere. So you want to be in organizations that are actually evolving to what the current situation is. And without that, or without putting that attention into diversity, inclusion, and equality in the workplace, then you'll probably learn that your organizations will fail and the communication will break and discrimination will take place. And that's really not something that you want your organization to be perceived at, I think, from your image point of view. And there's of course answer around, well, in this day and age, this is really about respecting everybody. So, you need to be the first one, if you are a leader in the organizations, to really talk about what does the value that I want to instill into these organizations and the people that I work with.
I might jump in.
Yeah, please do, Dixie.
Yeah. My answer is pretty short and sweet, because it's 2023. So get on board or get out of your leadership position. That's what I kind of really say to you. Like, there's really no reason why you can't look around your boardroom and look at the people, or the people that are sitting in your senior management and executive positions, and wondering why there is not someone that looks and sounds the same as me, or that sounds different to me. So it's 2023, it's probably time. And what I would say to you in terms of the reason why you need to pay attention is that your reputation is what people say about you when you're not in the room. So be mindful about what people will be saying about your organization if you don't turn up for everyone that is a customer, that is employee within your organization. You really don't have a choice in terms of getting on board. So do you want to get left behind? That's a question that I guess you as a leader need to critically reflect on yourself in your own time and work out, is that the person that you really want to be, in not driving an opportunity or conversations that allow us to embrace and celebrate everyone that we are connected to. So it's 2023. Get on board.
2023 indeed. And Dixie, I know some of the work that you do particularly, and a question without notice, but when you talk to your C-suite executive, that's hard to say. When you talk to those individuals in that C-suite mode and employ that role, and are they, when they're not on board, what are some of the things that you notice, and how do we kind of like, is there an easy thing to convince them? Because it's 2023, I absolutely agree, but sometimes people need to see what that end result will look like first before they can see start implementing.
Yeah, I'm not really the type of person that will drag you along kicking and screaming to the finish line. That's your responsibility. I'm tired, actually. I don't really want to be playing games with people in terms of managing up and having to have conversations to convince you that diversity and inclusion is the right way to go. It is the right way to go. There's no question about that. So my genius, or my space of, the sweet spot that I really operate with leaders, is asking you, is this the best that you can do? And I allow you to critically reflect on that yourself. And wherever it is that you land with that answer is up to you. It's not up to me. I know which direction I'm going in. I know which directions I hope my community are going in, and the clients that I'm working with. My clients that I work with, we are a big bunch of community, and we are trying to become this generation of conscious leaders that are really enabling cultural respect and understanding of First Nations people in this country to drive meaningful change. Otherwise, we become the same people and same organisations that have beautiful reconciliation action plans sitting on their wall with stunning art, but actually not much depth to it. So my job is asking the right questions at the wrong time, and the wrong time is when you want me to go away. When you get to that point of wanting me to go away, that is when you know you're on the edge of knowing what you know, and then knowing what it is that you don't know. So my job is to really facilitate effective conversations about what reconciliation, respect, and relationships look like in this country for Aboriginal people and non-Aboriginal people. And it is up to you to define where it is that you go from that point. So I'm really the one that drops the questions and allows you to do the work yourself, because I'm not doing the work for you. You have to do that work for yourself if you want to be what people are defining as that ally in this country.
Oh, thank you so much, Dixie. And Nicole, who's our workplace lead, has put into the chat there, inclusion and diversity done right equals belonging. Jan, your thoughts and reflections?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. And I think Dixie just captured it perfectly. I mean, it is 2023, any organization that I speak with, they're struggling to get great talent, and what's expected from talent these days from their leaders is a place that is welcoming, that's inclusive, that has got that diversity that we're looking for. So the risk for businesses if they don't get on board with diversity inclusion beyond just the cosmetic things, if they don't get on board with actually a true agenda, with action and progressive steps towards more inclusion and more diversity, they're just going to simply be left behind. So I just don't think organisations can afford to just do the box ticking. We're going to talk about obviously respect at work legislation. To me, as a bit of a spoiler, I think that's a great starting point, and we can definitely get compliance. It's a must-have. But really, for organisations to improve and get better and take it beyond that, they need to look at beyond just what's in the law and the legislation, and that means being truly welcoming, truly inclusive. As probably a lot of people see in the media as well around the Silicon Valley Bank debacle and that sort of what happening. There was some reports in the media, some people calling out, were they too distracted by diversity and inclusion? And that's that kind of damaging rhetoric that I think we need to challenge and say, well, actually, no, this is an organization, or whatever organization it is, failed on its merits because of the decisions that they made, rather than trying to find scapegoats with diversity and inclusion. Because again, diversity and inclusion, if it's nothing, it's about welcoming people. It's about making sure that they feel that they have a voice, that they see seen. So that's not going to affect a business's ability to generate profit and have sustainability. But again, coming back to Dixie's point, which I think encapsulates a lot of what we're talking about today, it's 2023. So companies to get on board, otherwise they're going to be left behind.
Mm. And people online right now, and that are viewing this or live in the chat, might be wondering from this recording, what are some of the ways that we can equip the workplaces to take those proactive, progressive, and preventative steps to promote respect? So I guess I want to open the question up genuinely. What role do all employees and employers have in shaping a kind and compassionate Australian workplace culture? Because fundamentally, if diversity is having a seat at the table and inclusion is having a voice and belonging is having that voice heard, kindness and compassion are key ingredients to ensure that we do feel a sense of belonging. What would you say with that? And I might ask you there, Ifrin.
Sorry, I'm just looking for the button to press. I think we've already touched in regards to making change is not just the leader of the organizations. It's actually everybody needs to go into that bandwagon, right? In regards in diversity, inclusions, and belonging. So. But it's whether we like it or not, it needs to start from the top. Somebody needs to make the change. Somebody needs to get out of their comfort zone, and somebody needs to say, this is not right, and this is how we're going to do it. And that role falls into the leadership of the organization. So then it becomes then the what do you call, the walk the talk proof that this is really the intention of the organizations. I think they are my fellow panelists here that can help a lot of the organizations out there that says, this is the step that you need to follow in regards to making changes. If you're going to be then start talking about inclusion, diversity in your organizations, understanding where to even begin, like where you are in the state of that process. Are you looking at yourself and say, well, we still have a big gap to go, and then what is that gap to fill in? I think my answer probably feel a little bit prescribed, but at the end of the day, it's not just that kindness, compassion. Of course, it is actually the value that actually comes into the value of the organization itself, but it needs to start. It needs to start from the start. It needs to start from the leadership, and then it is a journey in itself. And like Dixie said, either you join the journey or you lost.
I think we're growing a bit of a movement here. I think we're with like minds. And it certainly does start from the top, right? And I know that there are some organisations that might not necessarily have that level of support. So if there's employees who are listening to this, we're listening to this webinar, I'm really keen to kind of get some sense from our panelists about what could they do? What sort of change can they lead from the bottom? So happy to go to you, Ifrin, and I can see that Bruce is joined us on screen again, not just the voice from above.
My apologies, everyone.
Oh no, it's great to see you're back, Bruce. So, but Jan or Dixie, while Bruce catches up, is there any thoughts that you have about what practical things we can tell employees who might be struggling when a workplace is not necessarily leading from the top?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first, Dixie, if you don't mind. So, you know, from my perspective, leaders definitely play a role, but like you said, employees can still do a lot as well. So the main thing from my perspective is finding like-minded people within your organization that can share that view, and then having the voice, like that combined voice, because really we get change in organizations when there's enough mass and enough views of the same sort of ilk. So going to managers and seeking out those managers, whether it's from the sort of direct team leader level, whether it's representatives at the CEO or the C-suite, which is ideal, but finding representatives across the business that share that view. Also bringing in experts from outside can also be a useful sort of way to go about it. And I've noticed in the meeting chat, there is actually quite a few comments about, you know, is there some hard data and facts? So if you've got particular studies, and I know Bruce touched on one from the Harvard Business Review just earlier, but if you've got actual studies to back up why it's important to invest in diversity and inclusion, why it's important to be compassionate, that often will help convince those in more powerful positions that it's important to do. So again, we all play a role in raising the profile and increasing the awareness around these things. And that's how I do believe, to use your point, Alan, we get a bit of a movement of commonality and common view in terms of moving forward.
Thanks, Jan.
And
Yeah,
Alan, if
Sorry,
Oh,
Bruce, I'll just go first if that's okay.
Thanks, Dixie.
Oh, rude. Sorry, I was nearly about to swear. I think one of the most important points that I work very much in my job is, my core business is reconciliation action plans. That's all I do in companies, with companies. And one of the things that I've always tested people on is what they say. So I want you to back up your evidence. If you're going to tell me that you are an organization that values diversity and inclusion, or you are an ally, or this means something to you, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to pick apart your statement like a ham on a pair of pants, because I want you to prove to me that, in fact, what you're saying is authentic, it's real, and it's having an impact. Where's the evidence for that? So there's a point that you spoke about there. There's a question in the comment section. I'm not sure who asked, but, you know, what was the, Alicia, where you talked about, you know, how do we tend to get caught up in the visibility or the you know, the external validation of being an organization that is inclusive. But if you scratch the surface, you can start to see that the people culture within the business isn't necessarily reflective of what people say they are. People will tell you what's important to them, and then they will show you what's important to them. And unfortunately, in many circumstances, they are two very, very different things, right? There is the intention and the comms that sits behind it, you know, the communication, and then there is the action. And most of the time, it's pretty mediocre. Right? So it doesn't actually move the needle towards equality. If it's not moving towards equality, it's definitely not going to be moving the needle towards equitable outcomes. So I think as an employee within a business, it's your role and really your responsibility to test your leaders in a respectful, but in also an empathetic way, in terms of asking, because people know what they know and they know what they don't know. And sometimes they don't have the capacity or capability or experience or confidence to push past what it is that they don't know. So as an employee, you can be a leader in asking the right questions that allow people to see an alternative idea or possibility to the way that we operate in this company, from what we accept and what it is that we don't accept. So the tangible action can come down to you setting a different standard and consistently asking the questions of your leadership within the business and allowing them to rise to the occasion, right? It's not necessarily about you telling them what needs to be done, but asking them what is it that they are prepared to do to create a workplace that is truly reflective of diversity and inclusion in the most meaningful and authentic and impactful way.
And Bruce, I see you nodding your head then to some of the things that Dixie was saying.
Yeah, and I love this notion about what are the actions that you're taking? It's all very well for us to have good intentions, but we need to be taking action. And again, Alan, I would like to take a step back before I go forward, if I could take this moment. And I heard the panelists say this before. If in 2023 we are still debating the fact that this is what we must do to create safe and inclusive and gender-free workplaces, we are missing the point. We are missing the point in organisations. We are missing point in our community, and the research is inconclusive. We don't need to be talking about this. If your organisation is still showing barriers to making this change and taking the action, then there's a piece of legislation that we've referenced here that all organisations have 12 months grace to actually seem to be taking action in the organisation. We all may remember AMP's Me Too moment in 2020, and it brought about significant change in the organisation, notably a new chair and a new chief executive officer. There's another great resource, and when I can, I'll put it into the chat, that is put out by Chief Executive Women, and it's an article that Deborah Hazelton, who's the new chair of AMP and a member of Chief Executive Women, talks about, and it talks through using a framework that's referenced within the Respect at Work report, 7 steps, and it's really is a great reference tool, and it really, one of the quotes, and I'll just read it out: good intention is not enough. Be prepared to listen in, no matter how uncomfortable the message, and be prepared to hold yourself to account in taking action. The Human Rights Commission will have new powers, and organisations have got no choice but to take the action necessary to create safe, inclusive and respectful workplaces.
Thanks, Bruce. And we see a lot of commentary in the chat there, and a question there from John around quotas. I'm happy to kind of park that one, and we'll come back to that one because I think it's an important one to look at. And just wanted to emphasise too, there's an organisation, 100% Project, that has just done some research quite recently on gender quotas in the workplace. I'm going to pay attention now.
Can I just jump in? Can I jump into that?
Please
Sorry,
do,
Alan,
Dixie.
to just derail, because I think this is a really important conversation that we talk about in terms of, John's just replied there saying the stigma can occur. The stigma is always going to occur. It doesn't matter. I mean, I am recently I was appointed to the cricket board here in the ACT, cricket ACT. I'm the first Aboriginal woman. Our organisation's been around for 100 years, and I'm the first black woman to be appointed onto that board. And I went to an event here in Canberra, a networking event, and someone had said to me, "Oh, you're the diversity pick for cricket ACT." And I don't. It's literally a water off the duck's back for me. I don't care. Sure, people might look at me and go, "You're a woman. You're a black woman. You're the diversity pick." I don't care, because what it means is actually I'm in the room and you can't avoid me when I'm at the table. You can't avoid the work. So my blackness and my gender might get me at the table, and it's also going to be the thing that keeps me there, because I'm exceptionally resilient. I have a lot of courage, and I will not back down. And I'm a dog in a fight, right? So the quotas get us in the room, but it's the workplace cultures and being able to dismantle that will allow us to make the real impact, right? So I don't see any problem personally with quotas, and that's just my perspective, because what's the alternative? You look around your executive rooms now, your board, you're probably full of full of middle-aged white men, right? Or, that's like, let's be honest, let's be transparent about that. That's the reality of boards and executive leaderships in this country. That's what modern day Australia looks and sounds and feels like for a person that's not in the room. So if a quota gets me through the door, great. It's not going to be the thing that keeps me there. The respect, the demonstrated respect, is the thing that's going to keep me there, but also my capacity to know that this is bigger than me. So I embrace quotas, I celebrate them, and it's sorry, again, it's 2023. You can't not have workplaces that are reflective of when you go to Coles or when you go to, you can't tell me you're going to go to the AFL and watch a bunch of black fellas run around on the weekend doing their deadly brilliant black excellence thing and then say, actually, we don't have Indigenous talent that can work for us within this organisation, because I'm sorry, you do, but you're just not looking hard enough or you don't care about it.
And Dixie, that quote there is so powerful, and thank you for it. Quotas get us through the door, but it's respect that will keep us there. Jan or Efren or Bruce, is there any reflections you have of this conversation around quotas?
Yeah, for me, this brings up the whole tokenistic behaviors that some organizations engage in. So if people are, I sometimes see this, and I'm sure we've all seen it on LinkedIn, where companies are advertising diversity, they're advertising inclusion, and sometimes they may get some great hires that come from diverse backgrounds. But if they're failing at making sure that they're welcome, if they're failing at ensuring that they're respecting them, then they're going to leave. They're going to go straight out the door. So we've got to be really careful about organizations, even with good intentions. If they're taking tokenistic efforts, the actual impact is going to be much more damaging. So we've got to have diversity, yes, but diversity doesn't work without inclusion. So we're kind of coming full circle here a bit to what we started at the beginning. But yeah, this is what I sometimes talk to organizations about. And to use Dixie's point, still in Australia, a lot of the boards and a lot of the executive teams are full of white males. And so now they've obviously worked hard. However, we also need to make sure there's representation across all of Australia, across all of the client bases and customers that organizations have. It's not enough to just say, oh, well, we've gotten to where we've gotten and now we'll try to help people come through at lower levels. It's about getting representation across the organization so that we can also have those diverse perspectives coming through, those diverse experiences. That's the only way that we actually improve from here.
Thanks, Jan. And Bruce?
Look, I think this is a really complex issue for a range of organisations, but I think the thing that is really clear is that the thinking has led us here is part of the problem. So if part of the solution for an organisation is quotas or targets, then I'm all for it, because what it is has to be about, it has to change the conversation and it has to change the action. And all of us have a role to play in that. But I agree with Jan. I think the key thing for me out of this is if you're tokenistic about it, you can do more harm than good. So you need to be intentional about it, you need to be aligned about it, and you need to make sure that that you are bringing people in and you're supporting them to succeed, and that builds momentum. And I think that's really key.
And can I just add one more thing? It's that, it's not about saying, oh, we've got, the black fella in the business or, the woman are part of the organization. Think about what this means for your organization, right? Like I employ people in my business, not because of who they are, right? I employ them because of the value add that they provide our organisation and what we can do together, not because where they come from or what their degrees are. It's about the independence. Definitely recognise the technical skills and capability, but I add people to my team because it complements and it strengthens our workplace culture and the values that we have and the work that we're trying to do. So you can't, I get the technical stuff, the skills, the capability and the competency to be able to do the jobs, but I will employ a good person over anyone that has, 75 degrees any day of the work. If I recognise that they can connect with my clients, that they complement, that they can get along with their colleagues, that we have alignment in our social impact work, I employ a person. And that's what we need to look at. We need to employ the person, and we need to stop focusing on what the visual, the aesthetics of it looks like in terms of having an Aboriginal person or any person from a perspective of diversity in the business. There's more to it, and we have to look past that.
And Efren, I might bring you just into the conversation just for any kind of closing reflections or remarks around quotas.
It's an interesting topic, isn't it? And this is probably telling a little bit about what's going on in my household. this debate between me and my husband on the quota, whether or not they should or they shouldn't be, has been ongoing for a while. And I think the thing is, we don't need the quota if everybody else is on board. We don't need the quota if there is no, if we're already there. So the way I see it is just another, like you said, it's a regulation to actually help us drive to get to the final states that we want to be in. Sometimes, just like our kids, right? Sometimes you sort of like, you give them a little direction, or you give them a little boundaries. This is what you can do. This is what you can't do. This is what you should do. And in an effort for them to get there. And I see this just as a, I don't know, call it mechanism or technical way of us having that right representations, and not talking about just female, indigenous, but it's really about what you want to get as an organizations, what sort of representation you want to get, and here is the way to get there. So it's really just about trying to get to the final outcome that you want to have.
And what I really appreciate what you're saying there, Ifrin, and what I'm hearing is that we don't need these remedies if there wasn't a broader problem. What I would like to just kind of go to, and it's kind of our final question or topic that we want to discuss today before we kind of open up to some more questions. But thank you, John, for the question around quotas, and please keep them coming in the chat. I would like to kind of just pay our attention towards some of the recent changes. So in December 2022, new positive duty on employers or persons conducting a business or to prevent workplace sexual harassment, sexual discrimination and victimisation commenced in Australia. So the important change is that employers have to shift their focus to actively preventing workplace sexual harassment, sexual discrimination and victimisation, rather than just responding to it, as we've seen probably for the greater part of time. So the new focus and the new duty imposes not only a legal obligation, but a moral obligation on employers to take proactive, preventative and meaningful action. And that is part of the work that White Ribbon Australia does in our workplace accreditation program, as well as our other programs that we run across Australia. But I might start off with you, Bruce. What does this mean particularly for workplaces, and what advice can we provide those workplaces?
Sure, thanks, Alan. I think this is an area which boards of organisations, executive teams, HR teams, and everyone needs to be very conscious of, because the legislation is very clear and it talks about reasonable and proportionate measures by the employer, and what is meant by reasonable and proportionate does depend on the size of the organisation. But the change in the legislation shifts the burden from individuals to having to make complaints to one where employers must continually assess whether they are meeting the requirements of the duty to take proactive and preventative action. And Alan, you mentioned before the White Ribbon Workplace Accreditation Program, of which I am the independent chair for that. A framework that is provided by the White Ribbon accreditation process is a way that organisations can take, that they are taking appropriate action to build a safe, inclusive and diverse workplace. And the framework recognises through accreditation workplaces that demonstrate a commitment to eliminate gendered violence against women. But what it does demonstrate out of this is that to staff, to customers, to all stakeholders, that this is an organisation that's gone through an independent evaluation that says you're committed to equality and creating safe workplaces for everyone. And the notion is that it is independent. So it is a bit of a plug for White Ribbon, but I think it's important within the context for this, because it can help organisations demonstrate that they are meeting their obligations around positive duty.
And Bruce, thank you for the plug at all. We're very proud of the program, 10 years strong, but ultimately sexual violence, sexual harassment occurs in the workplace. We can't sweep it under the rug. We can't ignore it. We can't dilute it, and we can't deny that it's actually happening. And so organizations need to be prepared. And it's not, and to Ifrin, your point before about quotas, I'm going to come back to it. We only need these remedies or solutions because there's a broader problem. And the broader problem around sexual violence and sexual harassment in the workplace stems from a number of antecedents. And for me, it's not lost that Australia, we have a problem with domestic violence. We have a problem when domestic violence comes into the workplace too. Workplaces might have a policy as the bare minimum, but are they actually implementing that policy? How does that mean for the person receiving the practical steps or the implementation or receiving that on the other end? So I think this is a really complex area, and Bruce, your point is really right. These are our legal obligations, but we need to be demonstrating proportionate steps that we are actively preventing it. Ifrin, I might ask you just to comment or your reflections on organisations being prepared to prevent sexual-based violence.
Yeah, it's an uncomfortable discussion, right? This particular topic, and in most cases they're not. It's easier to just quietly put whatever policies in place and let people read it on themselves, and just says here are the things that you need to adhere to, and that's it, but that's not just it, right? We know that that's just not it. I think it's really about getting out of your comfort zone, and as an organization really make a stand in saying we don't want this, we don't tolerate this, we just have zero tolerance to it, and here's what we're going to do, and make it clear to everybody in the organizations that you just that there's just zero tolerance to this domestic violence, to this sexual discrimination. And with this new regulation, it's obviously very clear that your responsibility as an organization is needs to be escalated, not just handling it when it happens, but to prevent it from happening. Just like anything else, prevention is better than cure. So you don't want to be on the newspaper tackling these issues after it happens, but you do want to basically not being in the newspaper for the wrong reason. But the key thing is, I feel that it's something that really needs to be talked about, and everybody needs to be on board and feel comfortable talking about this topic.
And Ifrin, you bring a really good point to it, and that is around the taboo element of this topic. It makes people uncomfortable. But you know what? If discomfort is the price that we pay to ensure that we're promoting safety in the workplace, I'm willing to accept those uncomfortable truths and uncomfortable conversations. Yeah. And I wanted just to remind people that if any of this that is being really triggered at the moment, there is support for you. And we've got those helplines in the chat that you can call, particularly 1-800-RESPECT. Jan or Ifrin, I might, Jan or Dixie, I might throw over to you. It looks like, Jan, you've gone off mute.
Well, I was just wanting to kind of add to what Ifrin was just saying about, not wanting to see things in the paper. It's a slight pivot, but it's, I think, an important one, because what we're seeing both in the US and in Australia, particularly around non-disclosure agreements. So when sexual harassment or other forms of coercion have happened in the workplace, what typically happens for most particularly large organizations is, they go to the lawyers, they focus on damage control and protecting the brand of the business, and then they get individuals to sign certain agreements that forbid them to talk to anyone about that. And if anything, that's actually adding to a lot of the trauma that we see in workplaces. So in the US, but also here in Australia, and I believe Telstra might have been one of the first organizations to do this, committing to not requiring anyone who's been a victim of sexual harassment at work to actually sign an NDA or non-disclosure agreement. And I think that's a great first step. What I think it would be great to see more organizations in Australia and globally do is stop having people sign NDAs when any form of coercion has occurred. Because if we're going to actually learn from what's happening, let's not pretend like it doesn't happen. It does happen. Let's not sweep it under the carpet. So we've got to learn from it, and actually it builds trust if leaders get up there and say, look, we made a mistake, or there was an individual that was harmed by a particular activity or what have you. But if we actually admit to that, show accountability, step up to the plate and say, this is what we're doing to actually change it, that is how we get change in organizations. Hiding things, using the law to actually hide what's going on is not going to help anyone in these situations. So I just wanted to kind of just throw that particular point in there. Hopefully that helps.
It's really helpful, and it just demonstrates the complexity of this issue. Policy, practice, procedure, but ultimately it comes down to culture. In Australia, we have workplaces that are really struggling with this, and I wanted to kind of do a bit of a call out and a real kind of plea to those workplaces. If you are ignoring this issue, please don't. If you think that this issue is something that is not happening, rethink that approach. The Australian workplaces that we have need to promote a level of proactive preventative steps to ensure not only that safety is paramount, but to ensure that we are supporting our wider Australian community to put a zero tolerance approach to this. Sexual violence in the workplace is a really complex matter. It's impacting particularly women across Australia. And there is some work that's been done by a number of different organisations, and particularly the new Respect at Work report website hosts a whole bunch of information about what are the proactive preventative steps organisations can do. And to Bruce's point around workplace accreditation, it is another part of that solution where there's an independent audit of your organisational culture to see the real strength of it around its preventative steps, amongst some other things. I've seen some questions in the chat. I am very mindful we're coming to the end of the conversation. But if anybody does have any burning questions that they would like to ask, here is your opportunity to put them in there. But what I might do whilst we think about those questions, I'm going to go around and do a bit of a round robin. And I'm going to start off with you, Bruce. It feels like I'm picking on you, but I promise you I'm not. I think it's because it's B, it's the alphabet. But Bruce, kind of in 30 seconds or more, 30 seconds or less, sorry, what would be your kind of key takeaway, or that you want the people that are listening to really take away today as a message that you might not have shared already? Oh, you're on mute. And it is 2023, and I'm glad we've got an opportunity to say that.
Thank you. This legislation, Alan, it's good for employees, it's good for businesses, and it's good for our community. It puts the law of a positive duty on employers to demonstrate they are taking reasonable and proportionate measures to eliminate discrimination, sexual harassment, and victimisation in the workplace. If it's not on your board or your executive agenda, then it needs to be there as the starting point. Commitment from the top is where it needs to start from, and you need to adopt a framework for how you're demonstrating that you are building that safe and respectful, inclusive culture. It's good for your people, it's good for your business, and it's good for our community.
Well said, Bruce. Ifrin, I might go over to you.
Thanks, Alan. 30 seconds or less. It's not a tick box exercise. It's something that the organizations need to understand and realize that it's just not to look good, but it's your responsibility to actually protect the member of your community. And if you feel that you're not there, or you're not happening, it's not happening, and you see you are there, but you see a room for improvement, then continue doing so. And it's all about really that walk the talk of yeah. Thank you.
And I'm going to walk that talk over to you, Jan.
Yeah, look, I'll just, I guess, finish up from my perspective on if the law is your baseline, it's too low. Your bar is too low. So great work in terms of what the government's trying to do, I think, around this legislation, but it's just the start. If you truly want to make sure you've got a respectful workplace, it's about leadership, it's about culture, it's about ensuring that people are both diverse but also included and welcome. That's it for me.
I agree with that point, Jan. If the legislation is that baseline, then we are starting pretty low, because laws evolve with the communities and, and as we evolve as people. So I think it comes down to doing the work. really testing it and allowing yourself to turn up and take the meaningful action. It's not about, you know, talking about it. And because it is, you know, saying again, it is 2023, and there is going to become a point where the pressure continues to be applied to organisations and where you are really going to have to pull up. So you might as well start doing it now because it's not going away.
And the good news is that there are people to help and there's organisations to help, that you're not in it alone. And together we've got this wide community of practice across Australia that we can lean on each other, and we can borrow from each other. I think Australia's spirit of mateship is really strong, and I want us to really leave on that point that although there are some things on the horizon that might seem challenging or complex, ultimately, we are all in the same boat. We all can work on this together, and there are people there to support you. I wanted to say first and foremost, thank you to those people that have listened today and have been part of the webinar. And for those people that are downloading this and are viewing this after the fact, thank you so much for sticking with us. It's important for me to acknowledge our panelists today who have really demonstrated some powerful insights. I only wish we had another hour or maybe another 2 hours to spend with Bruce and Ifrin and Jan and Dixie. I encourage you to look at the work that each 4 of our panelists are doing. We've shared their LinkedIn profiles in the chat. I encourage you to follow because I learn from each of them every single day. And so they're really, really inspirational people. And if you do get an opportunity, check out their works. And if you're in Victoria, head down to Sister Works because I love the work that they do there. So thank you so much. And if you are genuinely a little bit curious about the work that White Ribbon Australia does and Communicare, please look at our workplace accreditation program. It is part of that solution. We're here to support you. And let's be clear, the cost of doing nothing about respect in workplaces is simply too high. We must take action to ensure that everyone is treated with dignity and respect and that workplaces are safe and inclusive environments for all. Because when we fail to do so, we're not only failing our colleagues, right, and employees, we are failing ourselves as a wider community. Thank you so much for joining us today. Take care, good travels, and we'll see you for our next webinar coming up later on in the next few weeks. See you later.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.